Have you ever asked, why God? Why God? Why are you testing me? Why am I suffering the way that I do? Why do so many things happen to me? I mean, I know that these things are testing to prove our endurance, and that this endurance can help me become mature, but I still struggle with why this has to happen. It seems like this has been a repeated thing for my people. Generations ago, the Cushites came, and they came and they invaded our land. And then years later, the Moabites came, and we were forced to bring tribute to their king. Then the Canaanites came in with their 900 chariots, and they harshly oppressed our people. Now the Midianites have overtaken our land. They've come and they've destroyed our crops. They've killed our livestock. They steal our food. Their camels have invaded our land, eating everything in sight, almost like they're locusts. Now our land is laid to waste. Our people are just hiding in caves and in the mountains, and we're just poverty-stricken and struggling. And for so long, our people cry out to God. We cried out to God with the Cushites, and God sent Othniel to deliver our people and lead them into battle. And then we cried out to God, and God sent Ehud, who slayed the evil king of the Moabites. And then we cried out to God, and he sent Deborah and Barak and Jael, and they rescued us from Jabin and Sisera. So we cried out again, hoping God would deliver us from oppression. But instead of sending a judge, God sent a prophet. A person who came and saying, I speak for Lord. He says, this is the word of the Lord. And so we all listened, excited to hear what God had to say. He says, God said, I am the one who brought you out of Egypt, out of that place of slavery. I rescued you from oppression. I freed you from tyranny. I drove out the people of the land, and I gave you their land, because I am your Lord. I am the Lord your God. And God continues to remind us of all the great things that he has done for us. And yet sometimes we're like petulant children, spoiled brats, who expect God to do more and more to kind of clean up our mistakes. And as we heard this prophet, we were expecting him to say, but now God is sending a deliverer. God is sending a judge. Now is the time of the Lord's favor. Now is the day where God is delivering you from the Midianites. It's time to retake our land and to recommit our souls. But that's not what the prophet said. The prophet continued saying that God told us not to worship the gods of the land in front of us, not to take in their worship or their customs, but we are to obey him. But we did not do that. And it's not the first time that this has happened. It seems like people of Israel are on this continual cycle. This cycle where we do evil in the sight of the Lord, where we abandon him. We turn to foreign gods. We turn and worship them and do these customs that these foreign gods ask us. And God says it's like us prostituting ourselves to these other gods. And yet when trial and suffering come our way, we blame God, as though he has turned his back on us. We are the ones that truly abandon him. Of course, these struggles, they come, and when these temptations come, we are drawn away from God, and we allow these evil desires to infest our souls. And this sin grows in us, and we continue then to do evil in God's sight. We continue to worship these foreign gods. And then finally, when oppression becomes too great and we want to be delivered, we cry out to God to rescue us, to free us. We beg God to get rid of the oppressors, to rescue us from the harsh captives. We long for God to raise someone up, to bring a judge, a mighty general who will lead our people in battle, or a covert assassin, or a beautiful prophetess who will rescue us, who will lead us, who will be a judge full of character and charisma and confidence, who will lead us into battle and rescue us from the hand of our enemies. Maybe I've got that all wrong. Maybe God doesn't send superheroes. Doesn't send people greater than we think. Maybe He just sends ordinary people. People like you and me, challenged to take this role of leadership that He wants for us. Challenge us to lead people in ways we never expected, causing us to do things we never thought we would ever do. At least that's how it was for me. My name is Gideon, and I'm from the tribe Manasseh, one of the weakest tribes and people of Israel. I'm the youngest in my family. Was never really looked up to by most people looked down on me, didn't expect much of me. In fact, they gave me the chore of grinding the wheat so that we could make bread. But with the Midianites around, we knew if we did it in public, they would come and they would steal our things. And so we went and I hid in a wine press. I hid in this wine press and I would grind the grain and then I would take it back to my family. And then one day as I'm carrying this wheat back to my family, I see someone underneath an oak tree. At least I thought it was someone. And then I realized it's not just a person. This is an angel of the Lord. I was nervous. I didn't know what he was doing there, but I slowly approached, and the angel looked at me and said, "The Lord is with you, valiant warrior." Wait, the Lord is with me? With me? If God is with us, then why has all this happened? Why is all this stuff going on? Where are these wonders that our ancestors have told us about? Why has God abandoned us to the hand of the Midianites? But the angel said that I have to go in the strength that God has given you, because God is sending me to help free Israel from the grasp of Midian. That's like, who am I? How can I be that one to deliver Israel? I'm just a weak kid, the youngest of my family. I'm no valiant warrior. I think you have the wrong person. But the angel insisted that God is with me, that He will use me to strike down Midian. And I didn't think that was possible, but finally I was like, okay, if you're right, then give me a sign. Show me, prove to me that this is true. And so it was interesting. I then prepared a meal for this guest, this angelic guest. And I got a young goat and some bread, and I brought it to him, and I placed it on this rock, and I poured this broth around it. And this angel reached out with the staff and he touched it. And all of a sudden it was consumed by fire. Then the angel disappeared. The proof was obvious. I knew that God was calling me, that the angel had passed this test that I had given him, and God was going to use me for something special, but I really wasn't sure about that, and I didn't know what it was. Then a few days later, I heard God tell me to go into my village. See, there was this altar to the god Baal, and this long pole, an Asher pole for the god Asher. And the people would go and they would make sacrifices to these foreign gods. And God told me to take 2 of my father's wolves and use them to tear down this altar and cut down this pole. And then rebuild the altar as an altar for the Lord and use the pieces of that pole to put on top of it. And then take one of those bulls and kill it and put it on top as a sacrifice to God. And so I prepared to do that, but I have to admit, I was a bit nervous, a bit uncertain. I didn't really want to do what God had asked me to. I knew people would not like it. But I got some of my servants together, and we did it. But we did it in the middle of the night so that no one could see us. We thought, well, that'll at least no one will really know I did it, and kind of send a sign to people, but I won't have to really be blamed. Of course, people woke up that next morning, they saw what I had done. And they started an investigation. They found out quickly that it was me that did it. They wanted to kill me. These people who were worshiping foreign gods, who were doing what they knew they shouldn't, they were after me because I tore down their altars. But I was surprised when my father stepped up and he came to my defense, even though I had killed one of his bulls. He said, if there's a problem here, if Baal has a problem, if Baal is a god, then he will contend with my son. He will strike my son down. You don't have the authority to. I guess they realized that Baal had no authority, that he was nothing because I was still alive. And slowly the people began to gain their approval. They started seeing me as someone that God was calling to use. And then we got word that the Gideon army was about to invade again. They're about to come and take more of our possessions. Then all of a sudden, the Holy Spirit, God's Spirit, enveloped me, and I knew it was time. And so I blew the ram's horn, and I sent out messengers to other tribes, and they gathered around, and we were preparing to take on our enemy. But as the bad time for battle approached, I was nervous. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how to lead these men. I started thinking, wait, this can't be right. This isn't the right thing. God's not really wanting me to do this. I'm just a nobody. I'm not one of these judges that have come before us. I'm just no one special. So finally I said, okay, God, okay, if you want me to do this, I've got a test. You've got to prove to me that this is what you want. If you will deliver Israel by me, then I'll do what you say, but only if you prove it to me. So what I did is I took my fleece and I laid it on the ground. And I said, God, here's what I want. If in the morning I come out and the ground is dry, but the fleece is wet, I know that this is what you're calling me to do. So I had a restless night's sleep, and I came out the next morning, and I walked up, and the ground was dry, and I picked up my fleece, and it was soaking wet. I was able to wring out a bowl full of water. God had proven himself. He'd proven that what he was calling me to do, but I was still nervous. I still wanted God to reconfirm what he had already confirmed, because I just wasn't ready. So I said, okay, God, don't be angry with me. Right? Let me just one more thing. Okay. This time, I'm going to lay out my fleece, and then in the morning, The fleece is dry, but the ground is wet. And so I came out the next morning. The ground was soaking wet. And of course, the fleece was bone dry. God had once again proven he had passed the test that I had given him. A test that didn't really even need to be made. And the truth is that many of us put God to the test. We put out our fleeces and demand that God show us a sign. We expect him to perform these parlor tricks, these things in order to get us to follow him. We insist that he needs to prove himself to us, to show us that he is worthy of our following him, to reassure us that we are not wasting our time. And even when he's made it absolutely clear, he showed us what we need to do, we still question him. We still ask for more signs. We still ask him to prove again and again that he is calling us to follow him. God has continually proved to us that he is faithful. He proves it every day, each new day, every day that we wake up, every breath that we take is a proof that God is with us. And still, we demand signs. We want him to show us again and again, not because he is not faithful, because God is gracious and compassionate and slow to anger and abounding in love. And even when we test him, he still performs for us. He still gives us the answer. He still shows us. Even when we are the ones turning our back on him, he is showing us that he is faithful. A lot of that is not because he is not faithful, but because we lack faith. We don't trust him. We don't trust who God says that we are. We don't believe who God says that we are. He calls us valiant warriors, and we doubt that. We don't think we're good enough. We don't think we have what it takes to do what God is calling us to do. We think that God has made a mistake, and so maybe we put him to these tests, demand these signs, to try to find a way to work around doing really what God wants us to do. We try to avoid God's calling in our lives. We try to keep from doing what God, maybe if we procrastinate long enough, he'll bring someone else. God has called you, like he's called me, to be his valiant warriors. To be the people that he has called you to be, not who you think you are, but who he wants you to be. And he will empower you. He will give you that strength. It's not on our own strength, but it's on his strength. So, what is God calling you? How is God calling you to be a valiant warrior in your life? How is he? How are you having trouble believing him? Are you having trouble, and so you want to put him to the test? Are you asking God to prove again and again how he wants to use you? Because one of the most difficult things is really accepting God's calling in our lives. To accepting it. So we put out these fleeces, we put out these tests. We want God to pass our standards because we have a difficult time. We have a difficult time to laying down our lives and following him. To saying, here I am, Lord. I've heard you calling in the night, and I will go where you lead me. Behold me in your heart, because God is called you, and he is faithful. He will do it through you. You, I, are his valiant warriors, whether you believe it or not.